said you'd hit the button.
Yeah, once I remember. Good afternoon, or good morning, it's 11 a.m. It is Monday, February the 3rd, 2020. This is a meeting of Commissioners Court of Grimes County, Texas. We're at 114 West Buffington Avenue. We've called the meeting to order. Second item on the agenda is attend and participate during the Harvey buyout kickoff meeting, and we are all here. We have a sign-in sheet that we've been passing around. Mr. Lilly, I'll turn it to you.
All right, Judge. Commissioners, members of the public, GLO, and county officials, welcome all. This has been a long time coming. This is actually kind of a historic moment for the county because to my knowledge, we've never had a buyout in Grimes County before. Hopefully we'll never have another one again. But, you know, this is
just a partial buyout. They're not buying the whole county.
not buying the whole county. You know, it's, like I said, it's been a long time coming. We've got several citizens that have been eagerly awaiting this program to be launched. And once this program is complete, it's not going to be far-reaching because we don't have a lot of money to spend, but the impact in particular for the citizens that have been severely affected by Harvey is going to be, you know, huge. And it's going to make the county safer, which is always what we're focused on, is trying to find ways to make it safer. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the GLO and let them go ahead and run this kickoff meeting.
Okay. And to our friends at the GLO, when you come to the podium, if you would state your name for your own peace of mind. This is being video recorded and will be on the county's website for the world to see. Okay? All right.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Sherry Brown with the General Land Office. And we thank you so much, everybody, for being here today. Really appreciate that. This is historic for Grimes County. And we are happy to be able to provide some assistance to get some folks out of harm's way. The grant amount is $1,512,129. So although it seems like a significant amount of money when you're buying homes, maybe, you know, more is always better.
Sure.
But today I have brought with me Robbie Bizot. He is a buyout expert. He is a vendor with the General Land Office, and he is here to go over the agenda with you guys and answer any questions that you may have. So without further time, I will introduce Robbie Bizot.
So,
Do we handicap you by bringing you to the podium?
no, you're fine.
Okay.
Thank you all for having me today. I'm Robbie Bizot. I'm the buyout infrastructure lead for ICF and procured vendor for the GLO, overseeing Harvey-related activities. So as Sherry mentioned, you know, you do have a contract right now for a little over $1.5 million. We'll go through real quick the contract effective date, which is going to be November 6, 2019, and contract termination date of October 31st, 2021, as you see that on your agenda today. The buyout application as proposed is going to be buying out 17 single-family or rental properties located in, I think, 4 neighborhoods that we've delineated in the application itself. We're going to go through the specific attachments. I think Sherry would probably go over the specific attachments and the contractual obligations in a second. But just talking about real broadly, you know, procurement reviews, as you see on the agenda item number 3. Agenda item number 3 is talking about professional services. We obviously know that we procure GrantWorks at this point to be your grant administrator, you know, so they'll also be doing your environmentals for you. As Tyler will suggest and talk you through this process, there's other procurements that are most likely going to occur, you know, after the grant administration services. If we ever bought a house, we know we have to have an appraisal, right? We know we have to have a closing. In this situation, we're going to be buying those houses and demolishing them, so we'll have to actually procure a demolition contractor. So those are 3 high-level procurements that are going to be initiated after the point in which we get the environmental review, which I'm going to talk about in a second as well. So just thinking about those procurements in relation to CFR 200, to CFR 200 bid and procurement rules, where I just want to always stress when we're talking about procurement is independent cost estimates. So at the county level, I would imagine, and again, Tyler can talk you through this, but you know, establishing an independent cost estimate before you go out for procurement is the basic rule that you want to protect yourself, because the feds, it's sometimes overlooked, and it's the first thing they look for whenever you go out for a procurement. And so how do you do that? Well, the county as a whole probably has procured some type of appraisal, you know, through different projects or y'all have done. You probably procured some type of title company throughout different things, appraisals through different things, demolition through different things. It's taking those historic numbers and coming up and establishing a benchmark before you go out and procure to understand what most likely you're going to spend on that procurement when it actually happens. It's a simple documentation that you just need to have before you go out for bid, and you follow that along with your bids, and then also your scoring methodology that you ultimately would award. So it's real high level. Again, your grant administrator will talk you through those as you start procuring those things. But as a GLO and their consultant, I always just want to stress the importance of an independent cost estimate.
Okay. Let me just ask a question or two
Yeah.
before we get all the way in. Of the 17 approximate units, all of these would be voluntary buyouts on the part of the citizens living in those properties?
Yes, sir.
None of them are forced buyouts?
That's correct.
That is correct.
Okay. And I don't say this to be funny. If indeed any of these properties happen to be in kind of an isolated rural area, when you talk about demolition, is it possible that they could be contracted to our volunteer fire departments for a practice burn down or structure fire process?
To be honest with you, the question's never been presented to me. I'd have to probably write that one down unless Tyler, you've heard about.
I saw that happen in New York, in
Okay.
Rockland County. They did a donation to their local fire department, but this would be a question for the GLO
Yeah.
as the direct grantee.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
And we certainly wouldn't put any residents in harm's way by having a house fire and having good structures next to it, but we do have some rural properties that they're kind of out in the middle of nowhere, so to speak. So if that's an option and if that helps to reduce costs, you know, in the demolition, then we
Yeah.
have more money for rebuild and so forth.
absolutely. So we'll take into consideration two important factors to think through that process is in the event there's any lead or asbestos found on the premises, that the impacts of those flammable, you know, those friable things being emitted in the air. So we'll write that down as a question.
Okay.
Anything that we do, as far as questions that I'm not able to address today, is a TA document that we'll get with executive management, where we'll circle back with that TA to give you a final correspondence with that.
Okay.
So we briefly, again, we'll just talk about procurement requirements, and at the end of this, I think if you have any questions, or if you want to stop me during these things, we'd be more than happy to address them. Yeah, please.
Can I follow up on?
Sure.
The 17 pieces of property, have those already been identified?
Not completely, no, no.
We've identified the areas, the neighborhoods, you know, until you actually do your applicant intake, you're not gonna know those. In which, you know, we're gonna talk briefly about environmental, there's two different phases of environmental reviews that you'll go through actually, you know, before you know the properties at this point, and then once you know the properties, we'll talk about that as well. So the establishment of local file structure, we'll let Tyler talk through the different mechanisms that they have established as far as a grant management software system, how it would offer some type of retention process, and then also what the GLO expects as far as organizing it. So, you know, before, it's not a custom for, some counties, cities are self-administering this. So what we establish is something called a left side, right side format. So it's basically tells you that on the left side of a file folder for an applicant, we want to see X, Y, Z, right? On the right side, we want to see X, Y, Z, all right? And so that's an easy, you know, structured methodology that when a monitor, either HUD, GLO, would come in, that it's a consistent file structure across every single program. Now, what GrantWorks, I believe, has is some type of, almost like an intake system that they're gonna do on your behalf. You want to talk briefly?
Sure. My name's Tyler Smith. I'm with GrantWorks. We are essentially, the GLO's provided a checklist for left side, right side. So we're going to be maintaining hard files for you, paper files. And we will also be maintaining a digital file on a software platform called Smartsheets. Smartsheets is great because it allows us to generate reports directly out of the database system, and it allows us to maintain a contact, like a contact log for each applicant. So every time we talk to an applicant or meet with an applicant in Grimes County, we can document that note. We can also give anyone with the county that's interested, like, viewer credentials for that smart sheet, so you'll be able to see the applications moving forward in real time. If you wanted to review, you know, when's the last time, you know, this homeowner contacted us about the buyout program, you'd be able to do that, or you can always reach out to us directly, and we're more than happy to provide that information.
Okay.
So, as I said, it's important to have structure to it, and especially working in some type of cloud portfolio like they are. I mean, in a homeowner program, there's a lot of steps. So establishing workflows that assist the reviewer or case manager in those steps is actually more prudent approach for that. So I definitely encourage it. Yeah.
So, David, in this situation, who's going to be doing most of the following along? Is it gonna be Grimes County? Is it gonna be Grant Works?
Both. I'm gonna be working, as I have been all along, working very closely with Tyler, and also with the GLO as far as any documentation, tracking it, and of course, I'll be coordinating that with the auditor's office, with Jesse or whoever's, assigned to this. But mainly, that's my role, to work with Grant Works, directly and to oversee this process.
All right.
All right, so just talk briefly about environmental reviews. So GrantWorks is also your procured environmental review specialist. What they're gonna do, because you don't know your specific addresses in these 4 neighborhoods, is something called a tier 1 or a broad environmental review. And they're gonna do this probably after we start this kickoff meeting. They're gonna start working on this. It's a requirement through NEPA. It's been around since the 70s. You have to basically look at the county, well, in this situation, your 4 neighborhoods, and what are the impediments of actually buying these proposed 17 houses in these geographic locations? Is it affecting the air quality? Is it affecting the sole source aquifers? Is it anything with the core? It's not anything with the core. Is it, and you go through a list about 5 or 6 different federal agencies that you get concurrences from. So you're basically telling them, hey, I'm doing X, Y, and Z in these areas, and they say, all right, excellent. In the event this happens, once you find your house, we require you to do X, Y, Z. It's this formal correspondence between federal agencies specific to the things that you're going to be doing in a geographic area. So once you are able to produce this record and get those concurrences, you would send that to the GLO, and they would also ultimately send that to HUD to get you something called the authority to use grant funds. And that basically says that you have the authority to do whatever you need to do specific to what you said you were going to do in the environmental clearance to move forward with the activities and actually start doing your application intake. Once you actually identify the structures themselves, then you do something called a site-specific environmental. Because whenever you're doing the broad, you didn't know if there was lead at that specific house, you didn't know if there was asbestos. So you're doing the same type of process, using those concurrences that you got with the agencies, and following a few more environmental factors to determine the actual specific implications of buying out and demolishing that structure. So throughout this process, the biggest thing about a demolition, as we just talked about, and we'll get the answer for, is asbestos and lead, right? So if there is any asbestos or lead found, normally the precursor to that is to note that and then indicate that to a demolition contractor so they're able to abate that situation, whether it's taking those friable things to a specific EPA-approved landfill, or it's putting backfill back on the ground if they had lead in the dirt. So it's a circle of life kind of process. It's getting the okay, reviewing it again, finding the problems, curing the problems is basically the environmental review factors of that.
So what if your environmental review on one piece of property exceeds the grant amount?
So you saying that the cost to actually do it itself?
So if you come across a place where somebody's been dumping oil for 30 years and it's seeped down the soil, in addition to their house having asbestos siding on it, I mean, that piece of property alone probably is gonna take up a significant portion of the grant.
For the abatement, for the, under your demolition contractor. And if that's the house that's chosen through the process to the eligibility, I think what we're doing is a first come, first serve with some type of prioritization that will happen
We have a
there.
prioritization schedule.
Yeah, so I mean, it's realistic, you have to know going into this that it's running a voluntary program off of a first come, first serve with some prioritization, that it's, unfortunately, in my opinion, the notion of going into it through that approach, you'd have to satisfy the environmental factors, because that person followed your intake prioritization that you would have. But I mean, what do you think, Kyle?
I would just note that in buyout programs, it's somewhat rare to move from the environmental review to an environmental abatement process. I've done, in maybe about 2,000 buyouts, I've never seen that.
Yeah, no, really. I mean, I think, because on the demolition contracts I've seen, you get a cost quote, for taking up a certain number of tires, a certain number. So you want to think about all the factors that can ultimately happen. But the level of review for hazardous wastes, there's a specific thing you look for on an individual site, and not necessarily, it's usually the geographic area of hazardous waste, like maybe an auto shop down the street. So that's the level of review you're typically looking for environmental waste. But as I would rely on your grant administrator.
Yeah, I would just add that the purpose of these housing funds isn't environmental abatement, it's to relocate homeowners out of the floodplain. And so the environmental review process is the most tailored to meeting all the federal requirements, right? But not necessarily to clean up any environmental issue that has occurred to the property and, through the history of time.
Yeah, it's not like a super fund.
Okay.
There's a different grant for that, right? All right, so, yeah, Jim.
If there is a piece of property and it's observed that there is some sort of environmental issue with the property, but it is bought out anyway, and the property reverts back to Grimes County, correct? That's my
You
understanding.
do own the property after the buyout. the
Who's
county does.
responsible for the cleanup at that point?
Well, I think what y'all have put in there is a caveat to environmental factors, I think.
So the idea that, so the county does own the property, is responsible for maintenance of the property forever into the future, but we're going out to buy properties that were impacted by Hurricane Harvey. We're not trying to find like a Superfund site and put it in the county's name. Just to be a little more specific, the county will have no costs related to environmental remediation. We wouldn't put you in a position where you're owning a property that requires a ton of local money for cleanup.
Our attorney would like that in writing, please.
I agree.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm gonna go over high level, as you know, this agenda is catered to, like I said, counties or cities that don't have a grant administrator.
Sure.
GrantWorks has already sent us y'all's preliminary housing guidelines for review. My staff has reviewed them, I just need to do the QA/QC of it, right?
Mhm.
So essentially what y'all have in y'all's housing guidelines right now is two things that are under, we're looking at housing, or in section 6.7 at this point, under housing guidelines, right? So you were required to submit within 60 days of the contract start date. You already have it in, it's already been reviewed. I just need to QC it, I'll probably do that on Wednesday. Then I send it to Sherry. Sherry's gonna do a second review, send it to Tyler and team. They're gonna incorporate the changes. They send it back to the GLO. The GLO says you're good to go for public comment period, right? So you're already ahead of the game and you're close to, relatively after this meeting, to have your housing guidelines ready to go. So,
Good.
so as a real high level, what y'all are attempting to do, which is totally within lines, you're gonna do two different options for an individual in addition to pre-storm value. You're gonna give individuals $5,000 in temporary living costs and moving expenses. So when you buy that house at closing, you're gonna give them $5,000 with something called optional relocation assistance for them to move out the house and have a temporary rental property while they're trying to find another house. All right, and that's a cap. It's a cap instilled by the GLO, and it's a cap that y'all are adopting through your housing guidelines. You're also gonna give them the option for down payment assistance. The caveat to down payment assistance is, in addition to the $5,000 they're getting in the pre-storm value of the house, is that they have to go, in order to get a housing incentive, and down payment in particular, is that they have to show that they're buying a house outside of a floodplain or flood zone, floodway, or it's elevated to the correct height within one of those special hazard flood areas.
Does their new purchase need to be within the confines of Grimes County?
I don't think we prioritized it.
I believe we
We did?
did
Okay.
attach in Grimes County, we have made it a rule that they need to relocate within the county and then also be out of the floodplain. The property has to be considered decent, safe, and sanitary. So we have to do an inspection of the replacement property
Sure.
to be eligible for the incentive money. And the reason we do that is because we don't disrupt your local tax base or school district funding when we tie local relocation to incentive funds.
Thank you.
Yep.
Quick question, is there a set amount or a range for that down payment assistance?
Yes, as the down payment's capped at $35,000, that's just the requirement. That's the threshold that you can't exceed as the GLO's guidance. What y'all have also established is FHA lending limits. So within Grimes County, I don't know off the top of my head what the lending limit is, but it's, if you went to go try to get approved by an FHA loan, you can't, they won't lend you more than X, right? So-
331,000.
330. So essentially what you've done is you've established a cap that if anybody you're gonna buy out exceeds $331,000 with the pre-storm value, the $5,000 and $35,000, they're not eligible. So you basically have created a cap to understand how you're gonna be able to maneuver through that process.
Okay.
So, this is excellent reading if you want to understand different housing incentives, but I just, unless y'all disagree, I think it's a proper methodology that y'all have chosen. I would have talked about the basics, how to design them, and different caveats to that. One of the things that I'm just gonna just talk about briefly is URA. URA is being triggered, and that's whenever you have a rental property that has an occupied tenant in it. that person who would apply to y'all's program, because we are doing rental properties,
Yes.
the landlord would be your beneficiary. That'd be the person that actually gets the free storm value, gets the housing incentive and whatnot. The person who lives in the house, the tenant, gets something called uniform relocation assistance. So it's a federal imposed assistance for a person who is being involuntarily removed as a tenant. All right. So there's different structures that the GrantWorks will do in order to find out that person's needs. Do they have special needs? Where do they live? Where do they work? So basically trying to keep them geographically located to where in the area that they're renting. And then they basically do a lot of case management where they give them 3 comparable housing options to be able to look for in that virtue. And then they also figure out how much money they're renting for and what's the difference. And there's a cap at which they can receive rental assistance through that. In a program this size, I would imagine you're probably going to get 1 to 2, probably at most, rental properties through this. But I don't live here or reside, but I would imagine that's usually what you see on 17.
Yeah, I would just add that for these types of buyout programs, in many cases, it's more appealing for a owner-occupant to pursue a buyout instead of a landlord-investor.
Yeah.
So I agree, I would be surprised if we saw more than 2, and I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't have any tenant-owned properties,
Okay.
or tenant-occupied, excuse me.
David, when we made our review of properties, you and I kind of did a ride around. Didn't we target like 4 or 5 that we thought were going to need assistance, or was it more than that? I mean, I know the number here is approximately 17, but
Yeah.
that's 3 times as much as what you and I identified early on.
As far as actual individual homeowners, citizens, yeah, that's about right. And several of them I have.
Yeah, that's about right. 4 or 5?
Yeah.
Okay.
That, and in several cases, some of these citizens have reached out to me just to find out where we are, what the status of the buyout. They're enthusiastic about it.
Okay.
I've had no one contact me to say that they don't want it or they have concerns about it. But again, I'm available if any members of the public do want to have questions answered
Sure.
about it, because it's going to raise questions for people, particularly folks that may think that they are eligible or should be, or they're at least curious about the program. And again, that's one of the reasons why I agree with you that we should have this meeting here, so it's recorded, so the public has access to this video, so that, again, we want to be open and honest about what we're doing and let the public know, and to try and answer any questions they may have. So, but in the cases that you are mentioning, these citizens, at least 3 or 4 of them have indicated they are interested. But again, it depends on the prioritization, how many are actually going to end up being eligible, how much money we have to be able to conduct the buyout, so.
I guess what I'm just thinking in my head is with the amount, the 1.5 million, if we ended up having 17, we've got a priority list. We're gonna have some irritated citizens that end up on the bottom end of that priority list versus the ones that are at the top, and probably be some challenge as to why am I not number 1 or number 2 versus number 14 or 15? So, and I understand we're doing this to assist citizens, but this is gonna be one of those situations, you don't make all the people happy all the time, I can assure you.
Absolutely, that's an unfortunate fact. But I mean, there's also the opportunities, for applications to FEMA buyouts is another option outside of this disaster funding, and there's also mitigation activities that'll occur through the GLO that can enhance and prolong this type of buyout component.
And don't misunderstand, I'm not knocking what we're doing
Absolutely,
here,
absolutely.
it's just that I'm thinking about what we're doing here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a homeowner program. Priorities are put in place for a reason. They should be priorities based on the county's needs, based on the citizens' needs as they see them. But it is a first come, first serve outside of the fact that it's priorities, and then there is the unfortunate fact that there's never enough money everywhere, right?
Right.
So it is the hard fact, but as long as you, I think as long as you communicate it appropriately through the housing guidelines, which I think y'all have, and you establish those priorities and really document why they are, then I think you have a good rationale.
I'm sorry to keep interrupting.
No, it's not a problem.
Can I interject briefly? I just want to explain the priority schedule very quickly. So because the county is required to spend 70% of its project costs serving low to moderate income homeowners, 100% of the time, we prioritize low to moderate income homeowners. We also
And
prioritize
for the world out there, low to moderate income is how much?
80% of the area median income, and for Grimes County, I do not know off the top of my head, but I will know by the end of this meeting. It varies
Well-
by how many people are in your household. So as
Okay.
the number of people residing in your household increases, the household income number to be considered low to moderate income also increases. So I'll look up the table and I'll share that information.
Because if we can, I'd like to get it on the tape, because that might eliminate some people from even thinking there's an opportunity, and it might motivate some that thinking, oh, I don't have a chance, but oh, well, at that level, I do have a chance.
Yes, Judge, let
Okay.
me look up those numbers. I would
All right.
also add within that low to moderate income category, we do prioritize disabled people, so people who are protected by the ADA. We also prioritize the elderly, single-parent households, and I believe we have veterans as a priority schedule within that low to moderate income category. So we just have an objective way of determining which applications are selected.
Okay, thank you.
Are we coming back around to questions later, or?
We can do it how you wish.
Okay.
And I'm just-
I'd like to do them later, but I keep butting in when the thought's right there.
It's-
If I don't ask now, I'll
That's what I'm
forget.
fine with, yeah.
Okay.
I'm
All right,
not trying
just
to
real
reach you
quick.
out, Judge. I want you to keep asking them when they come to mind.
So usually usually HUD will put out new income limits right around March. So we're probably gonna be seeing some different income limits coming up here. But for 2018, Grimes County was, and it's a long list, so let me figure out. So a family of, just make sure we got it, okay. So a family of one, that's one single occupant within the structure. If they make $34,250 or less, they're considered to be 80% of the area median income. Basically, if you look at, they always say they take a family of four. That's your basis point. So if you are making 100% of the area median income, a family of four in Grimes County is $61,100, whereas 80% of that for a family of four is $48,900. A family of three is $44,050 and below. A family of two is $39,150. And these will be also published, we probably need to put that as a chart in our. the
Program
housing
guidelines.
Yeah. This will be published in the housing guidelines as well. And if any individuals are listening to this today and they'd like to learn more about HUD income limits, they can Google HUD, H-U-D, income limits, Grimes County, and it'll tell you exactly the income limits for 80% and.
Good, okay.
All right. All right. And so as far as, and I'm more than happy to come back up here after, but normally what the process is Sherry will go through the different attachments that are within the contract, some important points in the contract, and then also reporting requirements, reimbursement of funds, and just basically the logistics and the contractual obligations at this point.
Okay.
Thank you, Robbie.
Now,
Okay, again, my name is Sherry Brown with General Land Office, and basically what happens is, as the contract moves forward, the attachments for the attachment A is a performance statement of work. That's basically a piece of the contract. It's actually inside the contract today, and just basically tells us the budget and how that moves through. Attachment B is assurances and disclosure of the lobby activities, and attachment C is general affirmations. A lot of it is what the attorneys force us to put in here, and then we have special conditions. What's really most important for Tyler, and every month he sends me a monthly activity report of the status of the program and what has happened in, like, on January 1st. I would get the report for December, for example, and so on. And that is part of the federal guidelines, and they require that every time HUD comes to visit. They want to see all the monthly reports and how that is progressing. Also, there's a security appendix for the subrecipients, and that is, Grimes County would be the subrecipient for that. And then there's contract reporting template, and that also is about the file structure for held at the county level. You guys will have paper copies of everything, and And Tyler will help you with your file structure and keeping that, and it has to be kept 3 years, I believe, after the grant, after the contract closes. Those documents will have to be held in place
Okay.
for that. And again, it is, in the contract, it is like reading, like if you want to go to sleep at night, you know, it's real interesting to be reading that, you know, right before you go to sleep. So, anybody have any other questions?
John, you've seen the contract and all? No.
I can provide him with a copy of a
Okay.
contract, you know.
If I have, it's been some time ago.
Okay. Because he does enjoy reading those
Then,
contracts.
okay.
yeah.
Okay, I'm happy to provide a copy of that contract to
Okay.
him. Everybody, yeah, go ahead.
One question, on this grant, there is a matching requirement for the county, is that correct?
No, sir,
There's no match whatsoever?
correct.
So 100% of the 1.5 million goes into the grant project
Yes.
without any funds coming from the county?
That's correct.
Excellent.
And so, when you say any questions, are we to that point?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So I understand David and GrantWorks are gonna review the applications, but how will people know to apply and when to apply and where to go to apply?
Well, you will, you're gonna post your guidelines, publicly post your guidelines for 30 days. And, you know, on your website, out to the public, in the newspaper, a notification.
There's, what GrantWorks has done, and I don't want to speak on behalf of Tyler, but what he did is a very robust outreach plan that you're gonna do. In that it also has abilities for, appeals, if somebody gets denied for something, how to address an appeal, where to send your appeal, the address, I believe, and that's by this building company, but I might want to speak more to that, but throughout the housing guidelines, it's incorporation of not only the process of which how to apply, but deadlines of when things start, when things end, when things, you know, demolitions start. It's comprehensive, so an individual that reads that document understands, what am I getting into, what am I getting, how do I apply, what happens if I get turned down. It's robust, so this is one document that any individual should always work around to understand the full program.
So, the,
Yeah, I just wanted to add, we sent out letters to anyone whose home is in these buyout areas
Okay.
we've described and their property intersects the floodplain. We sent out what's called a voluntary acquisition notice and GIN notices to potential tenants back in the fall. We provided in our guidelines an entire marketing plan, and that includes everything from going door to door, right, to make sure that people know about the buyout program. Sending more direct mailings, doing any type of social media advertising. In some areas that's helpful, in some it's less helpful. Certainly we want to publish our public notices in local news for when these guidelines are published. So there are a lot of different ways we're going to attempt to reach out to applicants to let them know they are eligible for it if they would like this buyout opportunity.
is there somewhere or somebody that if there is an application, that they can go for assistance in completing that application?
Absolutely. So we're going to be doing intake meetings with people, like when I say we, GrantWorks, Adam, Larson, and myself are going to be coming here and providing face-to-face case management services and scheduling meetings with people here in Grimes County. So they'll get to complete their application sitting down directly across from one of us, you know, who can answer any questions that they have.
Good.
And the decisions are based on a priority list, is that available to them or us, or?
It is, so it's included in those program guidelines that are gonna be posted for public comment. Ultimately, we wanna collect as many applications as we can from folks that are interested, and the prioritization schedule only becomes important if we collect more applications than we're able to fund. If we have money for 17 houses and only 12 people sign up, as long as we're hitting that 70% LMI requirement, we don't have to ever look at the prioritization schedule. So we just want to market the program so that we collect an application from everyone that's interested, and then be transparent about the prioritization schedule.
And I know you mentioned early on, there's a portal, I don't remember exactly what you called it, but some sort of portal to monitor the progress of these applications. I'm not necessarily, me personally, interested in going through that whole process,
Sure.
but will there be a time that the court is advised on who or where which properties were chosen?
Absolutely. So one thing we have to be considerate of is HUD privacy laws, so we're not using actual
Right.
homeowner names, but we can provide briefs to you guys as often as you see fit. Maybe it's just once a month to discuss property addresses or possible sites we might be able to complete a buyout. We'll just, again, have to be conscientious of protecting the personal, private information of individuals.
For sure. Anybody else?
I'm gonna ask a question on the deadline or the contract termination date, 10/31/21. It's kind of a first come, first serve and priority. Would that be a fair way to say
I
it?
think so, yeah, it's
Because
both, right? Because we do have to prioritize low to moderate income.
Right.
So it doesn't matter if you fill out your application today or 3 months from now. If you're low to moderate income, you're gonna be ahead of someone that doesn't fit into that income category. But we do have, application date or completed an application is like a tiebreaker between certain applications.
Well, there's a tendency for the human being to procrastinate.
Yes.
And I don't, I would hate for us to have somebody walk in on September 30 of 2021 and say, here's my application. They meet all the criteria, and all of the money was spent $500,000 ago.
Mhm.
So,
So, in the guidelines that we're publishing, we actually articulate the date that we are going to stop accepting applications for this
Okay,
program.
okay.
We're gonna leave that application window open as long as we can. I think we do it for about 5 months. During that 5 months, we're gonna be putting a lot of effort into marketing the program to
Okay.
collect as many applications as we can. But we have to establish hard deadlines because even after we collect an application, there's a lot of work to do to actually get to the point where we're buying that property and demolishing it.
I guess what I'm saying is, I don't want us to give the false impression if we put it on our website and what have you, we have a termination date of 10/31/21, people go, oh, well, no rush, I'll do this next year,
We'll be very transparent about the date, the deadline date for submitting an application. It'll be posted in those guidelines that are gonna be available for public comment and on the county's website. And then we're gonna verbally tell that when we go out and market the program.
I know this isn't your first rodeo with this sort of thing, but for us, it's pretty much our first one, so.
Yes, sir.
Hopefully our last one.
And two, Judge, one of the things that we are gonna do as we go forward, like Tyler said, they've already sent out the exploratory letters. We are gonna make contact with these 17 homeowners to verify whether, number one, do they want to do the buyout? And if they
Right.
say no, then that's their prerogative. We're not, like you already had decided, there will be no eminent domain exercised in this. They have the right to say no.
If they say no or have that right, do we collect that in a written format?
I would suggest we do have something on record.
It can be difficult sometimes to get people to sign a form about the buyout program if they are very interested in not. So we're gonna ask them to sign a form. If they refuse to do so, we will document it as case managers in our contact log in the Smart Sheet system. And then we'll print out that contact log and put it in the file just saying, this individual refused to sign an opt-out form. It's simply an
Okay.
opt-out form because they're not interested type
Well,
of
they
form.
declined.
That's right.
Okay,
Judge, can I ask a question?
certainly.
Are these properties going to be eligible for mitigation credits after the county owns them? And if they are, is there somebody that can facilitate getting us in touch with the market to make those credits available?
So you're talking about credits from additional grant sources, is that correct?
Well, I'm talking about green space or wetlands or whatever it is that Condors or whatever face when they wipe out Navasota Ladies Tresses or Houston Toad. They've got to then mitigate and they've got to go establish another piece of property where they typically burden it with a conservation easement or something to that effect.
Sure.
So these tracts that we have that are going to be effectively off the tax rolls, are we going to be able to sell credits in that market and the county thereby reap some benefit from these tracts that we'll have that are just going to be sitting fallow?
I get the point. I mean, I
don't see why not.
I don't see why not either. I mean, in literally Google mitigation land trusts, and there's gonna come up with a couple of banks names that you can call. for this exact thing.
Okay, so y'all haven't faced this and don't know, there's nothing that you know of that would prohibit the county from using
Correct.
this?
There's nothing I know of that.
Nothing would prohibit you. It's certainly not advertised as something you can do in the either federal or state guidelines, but nothing's prohibiting you from doing that.
Yeah, and the only obligation that you have is a land use agreement to require that land remain in green space for perpetuity, but that's, green space could be defined as reverting back to the wetlands, which is essentially what you're trying to do.
Right, right. Well, we get some value out of the thing that potentially has no value or requires maintenance by the county, which has essentially negative value. We gotta-
Yeah, there's nothing in the regulations that specifies that there's an inability to do that.
That usually means, sure, you can do that. I'll have to do some research, but what you're describing sounds like a totally eligible use of the land that you're buying to create the green space.
John, I'm not really sure what you asked.
Well, so I'll give you a for instance. With the Centerpoint project, they wiped out an area of land that had Navasota lady's tresses, an endangered species of a plant, what some people call a weed, a
Right.
flower or weed or whatever. One of their requirements from whoever, PUC or whomever, I may have been part of the federal environmental, was to go and secure acreage equivalent to what they wiped out and to impress upon that a conservation easement. A conservation easement is where you record in real property records that this property is not going to be used by anybody from this point on. In perpetuity, no one can use it for anything other than maintaining its status today.
Correct.
In fact, there's a question of whether you can run cows or you can hunt, maybe not even do those things. So they were having to buy a piece of property and impress it with a conservation easement. Well, they start looking for tracts like that, and if there's a market out there, multiple markets out there as I understand it, where if you have land that you're willing to freeze its use and say, we're gonna keep this in the same condition that it's in today in perpetuity, and it can constitute green space, then those folks like Centerpoint, who are needing to go and find space to mitigate the problems that they've caused with their land, they can buy those from you. Essentially, you can offer them into the market and get credits. And then you're paid for the fact that your dirt is satisfying their obligation.
And they get to be responsible for maintaining that henceforth?
What's that? No, we would own it.
We would own it.
We would own it, and
Okay.
we potentially would just impress a conservation easement, which is effectively what we're agreeing to under this process.
Yeah.
We're agreeing, we're not gonna use it for anything, but we're gonna be holding it, making no money off of it, no tax dollars, because you own it.
Right.
And essentially, if you could sell it as a credit, then you're making some dollars for the dollars that you're losing.
Understood.
Would
Thank
that be
you.
program income?
Y'all will be gone before we do that.
Yeah, thinking about it. Yeah, it probably would be program income.
Is there a time limit? They like, after close out and 3 years later? I mean, it's a question.
So, yeah, so before we move forward with this, let me get all this stuff in writing for you, right? Because typically, a good point, it would be program income, to my opinion, it would be
Which
program
is
income.
prohibited, I'm guessing?
No, that's not prohibited. But
You just have to return the money.
Well, no,
To
no,
whom?
so, well, the program income is proceeds made off of, any project that was funded with CDBG, any proceeds
Okay.
of income made off of that
I
investment would be considered program income, and the threshold for that is $35,000 a year off that activity. And so the problem with program income is you just have to report it in perpetuity if it triggers program income, once you start triggering program income. But that's a one-time deal, so the limit and threshold is 35,000, right? So let me give some guidance on that, because again, I think it's a legit idea, you know.
It's a great question.
You know, but it's a really good question, so
Well,
I think it's just.
what I hear you saying is, underlying that principle is, if we do this for you and there's a benefit that results to you, we should get it back because we've paid those dollars, the federal government says.
That's sort of the
CDBG
intent.
says, it's
Yeah.
the Community Development Block Grant says.
Whoever that acronym is.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. But that's a rule off of any investment. It's more specific to like an economic revitalization project, you know, where they're actually infusing money for an economic stimulus,
Hmm.
that they assume that there's some type of return that should be effective for that.
Right,
Right.
right.
So let me get back to
Okay.
you about that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Judge, I would remind you of the conversation we had with TxDOT in regards to the 249 project and their wetlands. If you remember, they're building 2 half-mile-long bridges to span the wetlands.
Right.
Because they did not want to go through the time consumption of going and acquiring an location
Right.
to mitigate the wetlands. So if we're able to do this, this will be an excellent resource for us in the future when, you know, projects like this come along. The county's got a wetlands banks established, and TxDOT or contractor, whoever needs it, buys into that. And all the 2 years of permitting and everything that goes in ahead of time has already been taken care of. So, you know, they could have saved a tremendous amount of money on that project had this been established in the past.
Good point.
But the threshold is 35,000, as long as you don't exceed 35,000
It's
theoretically.
not considered programming cuts.
Okay.
And that would be cumulative.
Yeah, it's cumulative on the activities itself. So I mean, essentially, the number of houses, I mean, your mitigation is capped. The credits itself, I'm sure we capped that if you were trying to obligate all those lots for that intended use.
If we're talking
Per
about the
year,
appraised
right?
value of
Per
the
year,
lots,
per year.
if we're talking about appraised value of these lots, just thinking off the top of my head, some of these lots, we're talking 8,000, 10,000. I mean, we're talking really low appraisal values on some of these lots,
Yeah.
undeveloped. And once we take the stuff off, the buildings off, they become undeveloped lots.
But the sale of the credit is much higher than.
Much
the
higher.
market.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Much higher.
Because they desire it, they really want it, they're really willing to pay
Ah,
for
I
it.
see.
Yeah,
So it
they're-
raises the
they're
value of
pricey.
that lot, yeah, I
They're
see what
pricey.
you're saying, yeah.
Okay. Ms. Sherry, back to you.
Okay, anybody else have any other questions?
Neil, you're back there quietly listening.
Soaking it all in.
Okay.
In your professional opinion, do you anticipate expending the total of the grant? I mean, do you know?
Well, like you, this is my first buyout. So, Robbie?
Yeah, I mean, from what Tyler tells me, and the amount of outreach that y'all have already done, and the outreach that you're going to do, you already have the interest there. I don't see why you're gonna be oversubscribed, not undersubscribed for these grant funds.
Okay.
Really, the only other thing that I have for the group is talking about the startup documents, which, you know, Tyler has a list, and that's what he'll be submitting, all startup documents. The guidelines is included in that, which has already been sent over. And all those have to be received by the General Land Office prior to any draws being, you know, requested. And, you know, we've got a ways to go, but I just, you know, wanted to make everybody aware that before any draws can be requested for the funds, all the startup documents have to be 100% complete. And Tyler is well aware of that.
Okay.
So, and there's a list of those documents here in the agenda.
Will all of those documents be available in your office, Mr. Lilly, for public review?
The startup documents aren't really, you know, available for public review.
The startup
So-
documents, many of them go through Commissioner's Court, so you guys are gonna have to deal with me a little bit to pass a few more resolutions. So I would say a good part of those policies or resolutions are available to the public.
And then they would be attached to the Commissioner's Court minutes
Right.
as a part of the attachments too, so.
There's, most of them are available on our website, and there's a few of them that will be, you know, provided by GrantWorks.
Is there anything we should have asked that maybe we haven't asked through your experiences that would be helpful?
You know, I've spent a good amount of time working and speaking with Dave about the program,
Right.
and you guys have a very sophisticated system here for emergency management. I think all the good questions have been asked, if not today, certainly in
previous
previous
meetings, yeah.
meetings. That's right. And you know, Dave really understands the rules of these programs, and so I feel like you guys do at the local level have a strong grasp of what we can do with these funds, what the intent of these funds is, and how to get from A to B.
Okay. Anybody, anything else? Then with that, we'll move to agenda item number 3. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Is there a second?
Sorry.
Go
ahead, ask
ahead.
There's a motion before the court, and it has been first and seconded by Commissioner Dobianski and Commissioner Cox. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And we'll let the record show that Commissioner Mallett and Walker were absent from today's meeting. Thank you all for being here very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.